Hi everyone, I'm Jack the Rambling Raconteur, and I hope that you're doing well. I'd like to share a few thoughts on the New Roman Empire, A History of Byzantium by Anthony Kaldellis. This book was published this year, and it is a massive monument of scholarship and of writing. Kaldellis gives us 900 pages of text, another 200 pages of citations and notes that just reveal how scrupulously he researched this narrative, but it is very much a narrative. It is an extraordinary book, an extraordinary undertaking to examine the centuries of existence of the Eastern Roman Empire, the New Roman Empire, Byzantium, however one chooses to phrase it. A civilization that has often received short shrift in history, whether it's from the old boy Edward Gibbon in his Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, where he almost sarcastically mocks that the Eastern Roman Empire should be considered a continuation of the Roman Empire. And that tradition, has continued in many ways. And that's something that Kaldellis explores throughout this text is why has this civilization been so demeaned by historians, by its contemporaries? What was it about the New Roman Empire or Byzantium that evoked this sense of disdain, this sense of discomfort, this sense of othering, that ultimately led in large part to the empire's downfall? That's something that he explores throughout the text. He gives us the luminaries, the men and the women who were constantly recreating the New Roman Empire, who were constantly finding a new way to move forward for an empire that existed for many, many centuries. And I think that's perhaps what Kaldellis and before him, someone like historians like Julius Norwich, and something that attracts a reader like me is this question of, wait a second, if this was such a decayed, ossified, almost clownish state that was a failed state for so many years, how on earth does it last for a millennium as its own state? How does that happen? It doesn't really make sense. And it's something that Kaldellis is willing to examine and explore. I wouldn't say this is a revisionist history of Byzantium, but it's certainly a history that really is exploring the ways in which the Byzantine Empire was a continuation of the Roman Empire and the ideals of the Roman Empire that date back even to the Roman Republic. There's a real sense of scholarship and attention and respect for culture and for people. There's always this sense of how were actual people affected by these changes? Who cared about iconoclasm? And why was that important? Why were people willing to stake their lives for it? Or were people really staking their lives on that? And Kaldellis really goes in and examines so many sources. That's why there are 200 pages of notes. But he reveals a fascinating insight into what we can learn from the Second Roman Empire, what we can learn from Byzantium. What are the triumphs from millennia of history? What are the tragedies? And who were these individuals across so many centuries? So I do want to read a couple of passages just to give a sense of the writing, because it is very intensive. It is a very quickly moving text, but it's also something that can require a close reading. So here he is writing about the Ecumenical Council of Ephesus. The Ecumenical Council of Ephesus was the biggest fiasco that the imperial church had yet seen, and it happens to be the best documented event from all antiquity to that point. Theodosius genuinely wanted the bishops to discuss the theological issues without secular interference and reach an agreement in good faith, which shows how badly he misunderstood the character of the ecclesiastical establishment. The metropolitan bishop of each province was invited in a fatally vague wording to bring a few of his suffragan bishops. Cyril, who understood how councils really worked, brought a huge voting block of 50 Egyptian bishops with him. The power of the Alexandrian bishops in church politics stemmed from their ability to muster large contingents of suffragan Egyptian bishops whom they personally appointed to office, often through bribes and networks of patronage, and who were loyal to Alexandria. At Ephesus, Cyril secured the support of the local bishop Memnon, who brought over to his side many bishops from the host province. Nestorius was isolated and outnumbered from the start, and his habit of stating his positions in provocative terms in private meetings cost him the support of potential allies. It goes on to say, Nestorius was condemned in absentia as a new Judas on the first day by over 150 bishops, and the title Theodicus was declared to be orthodox. When the Easterners arrived on 26 June, they convened a counter-council on the very same day under the leadership of Ioannis of Antioch and condemned and deposed Cyril and Memnon. As Ioannis had honored the spirit of the invitation, he had limited each metropolitan to 2 suffragans, and so his council contained only 43 bishops. No doctrinal issues had been settled. There had been no debate. There was no Council of Ephesus. And so it is very readable. We have the details. Kaldellis has introduced us earlier to Cyril, to Nestorius. We know who these individuals are. We know what they're fighting over. And we can see those personalities suddenly culminate here. And yet he's able to do this very rapidly within a paragraph or two. And so it really is a marvel of scholarship and pays dividends for a close reader. Here he is talking from a more historical perspective, talking about Justin II. Justin II was the son of Justinian's sister Vigilantia, while his wife Sophia, who was immediately raised to the rank of Augusta, was Theodora's niece. Thus, the dynasty continued on both sides. Sophia was allegedly a Monophysite, who changed sides in 563 to boost her husband's chances for the throne. Our sources mention her and Justin together as a single source of authority, with uncommon frequency, and she is credited with important decisions. For the first time, the emperor and his wife were depicted together on coins. Sophia was the most powerful empress in our history so far. Justin had previously been the palace chief of staff, cura palatii. Not the highest office, but when the moment came, he was at the right place, and supported by the eunuchs and Tiberius, the captain of the guard. The beginning of the reign was ugly. Justin had apparently agreed with his namesake cousin, Iustinos, an experienced general and son of Justinian's cousin Germanus, that if one of them should become emperor, the other would hold second place in the state. But Justin now arrested his cousin and dispatched him to Alexandria, where he was quickly murdered, allegedly on Sophia's orders. On 3rd October 566, 2 prominent senators were also executed, Eleutherius and Adaios, the second a former praetorian prefect and now prefect of the city, on charges of conspiracy. Eleutherius had been implicated in 2 conspiracies against Justinian, albeit cleared in both, and the 2 had carried out the arrest of the patriarch Eutychius when the latter objected to Justinian's aphthartodocetism. The deeper background of these court factions eludes us. The new regime took decisive steps to placate wealthy interests and was willing to blame Justinian for the difficulties in which it found itself. Many things were too much neglected while my father was alive, and as a result, the exhausted treasury contracted so many debts which we propose, moved by pity, to restore to the unfortunate people. The old man no longer cared, he was altogether cold. For the first time, the treasury was in debt to private interests. Justin paid off those debts and burned the bonds, the reverse of what emperors usually did, which was to burn documentation of subject states to the state. Justin too did that too, remitting tax arrears back to 560. And so we go on to find out about Justin. But as much as Kaldellis gives us details, he also is constantly weaving the ellipses of history, the elliptical returns of history throughout these pages, and being able to foreshadow problems that will arise, or contrasting a decision with a prior decision or a later decision that will be more effective or less effective, and why that might be. He spends a lot of time going into the different ethnic groups that were part of the disparate empire, how the Goths or the Huns were brought in, or were opponents of the empire, what that looked like, what that meant, what it meant for Isaurians or individuals who were in the middle of modern Turkey, who were part of the empire, but not necessarily active parts of it for whole decades. He goes in and examines what happens in the titanic clashes between the Roman Empire and the Persians, the Sasanians, and how the 2 great powers of that era essentially push each other to the brink, and then are both overrun in some cases by the Arab conquests, just immediately after their enormous wars. And so that there are so many different ways that Kaldellis brings this history to life, and really allows a reader to appreciate what was happening across a millennium. He has absolutely no reservations, though, about examining the issues that led to the downfall of the empire itself, but also ultimately of the fall of Constantinople. For centuries, wealth and people had flowed into Constantinople. Now they began to flow out. The Roman elite fled from the city rather than endure Latin rule, and many of the poor abandoned it as well. About a sixth of the city was a burned ruin, while the rest was stripped of valuables. Too late. The Pope and others in the West realized that the project had been driven more by price than by prayer. As a result, the beautiful city of Constantine, the common delight and boast of all nations, was consumed and blackened by fire, captured by force, and hollowed out of its wealth by these random Western nations. Constantinople would never fully recover, nor would the Romans. The lion's share of blame for the destruction of 1203 to 1204 lies squarely with the Crusaders, and not just with the participants in the Fourth Crusade, but with the crusading movement as a whole and the entire culture, that of medieval Western Europe. They gave rise to it. Much recent scholarship on the Crusades is apologetic, and studies of the Fourth Crusade in particular are masterclasses in the use of the passive voice. Mistakes were made, etc. Yet those mistakes were shaped by underlying prejudices and ideologies, including the willingness of the leadership to put financial contracts over all other considerations, the readiness with which the Venetians broke their oaths to defend the Eastern Empire, in exchange for which they received lucrative concessions, the decision to intervene in East Roman politics, where the Crusaders had no legal standing, the Norman tradition of using puppet claimants to the throne of Constantinople as a pretext for aggression, the prejudice against the Greeks that at every step nudged the Crusaders closer to violence against the Romans and cloaked naked aggression, the greed and envy with which many had regarded Constantinople, and the moral rottenness of crusading in general, which not only channeled hatred against perceived enemies of the faith, but generated, armed, and funded it. Romania was hated partly because it had showed insufficient enthusiasm for the crusading project. And he is there talking about the sack of Constantinople during the Fourth Crusade, including aided by Venetians, who essentially, a child returning and smiting its parent. And so there's real passion behind many of Kaldellis' pages here. He is constantly trying to dredge the ruins of Constantinople, and allowing us to glimpse the beauty that could be there, the lives that were there, the voices that were there, the culture that was there. And he constantly refers to it as Romania, or as New Rome, or as Rome itself, and pushes this narrative that rather than the othering of the Eastern Roman Empire, it very much did continue many traditions, and in a sense amplify traditions that could have perhaps been an aspect of the later Western Roman Empire had it survived. And so, as I said, this is an incredible book. It is a massive, massive work. I spent months reading it and dipping in and out of it, rereading passages. I found it to be a very, very worthwhile reading project. I will say, though, that it is probably much more approachable if one has some grounding in the history of the Second Roman Empire or of Byzantium. And if you're looking for a short one-volume book, this is an authoritative one-volume book, but a short introductory one-volume book would certainly be A Short History of Byzantium by John Julius Norwich, which was a distillation of his 3-volume History of Byzantium, the early centuries, the apogee, which I regard as maybe I think I listed this as one of my 10 favorite nonfiction books some 4 years ago when I was just starting this channel, and the decline and fall. John Julius Norwich really did a great project of trying to bring to light many of these stories and histories that a lot of readers had just never been familiar with. And Kaldellis now, I think, really advances that and corrects misconceptions that had been in the scholarship when Norwich was writing, and it really does, reclaim Romania for what it was. Certainly, if you really enjoy the original sources, there's Procopius' Secret History, which is just bonkers and hilarious and mean-spirited and everything one would hope from a gossipy history. Michael Psellus with his 14 Byzantine rulers definitely toes the party line, but again, is a primary source for a good chunk of history. We as well would have something like the Alexiad by Anna Komnena. And then another work that might fit in would be the, what is it, the 4th and 6th volumes? I believe it's the 4th and 6th volumes, The Age of Faith, and then The Reformations in the Story of Civilization by Will Durant, ably assisted by Ariel Durant, who would later end up on sharing the byline with Will. But even the way they approach the story of the Roman Empire is very particular, and really from the sense of, well, the conquest of Constantinople by the Ottoman Empire allowed the Reformation to occur, because there was suddenly this great fear, and the Holy Roman Emperor was, very focused on the idea of Ottomans conquering his lands and marching on Budapest and Vienna and things like that, rather than being able to focus on a German monk who was venting his spleen. So I would recommend all these. 1453 is a great book if you really want just a focused history of the final days at Constantinople. But it's Istanbul is a city I would love to visit one day. Would love to see the architecture that still remains. Certainly in Ravenna and other places we have some artwork. So if you are at all interested in Byzantium or the New Roman Empire, this is absolutely a book to grab, to spend a lot of time reading and rereading and enjoying and learning. So hope everyone's doing well. Thank you.